I'd like to broaden a little bit the perspective and discuss, in the limited time which I have, the phenomenon of Islamist anti-Semitism. And the first point I want to make is it has taken an extraordinarily long time for people to sit up and pay attention to something that has been around for at least 3, if not 4 decades. Last night you heard Lord Weidenfeld, at the ripe age of 95, making some very significant remarks at the dinner. I would even quote him on one issue. It stuck in my mind. His comment about ISIS and the various slaughters that we see going on currently in Syria, Iraq, and other parts of the Middle East, that it's a fusion of Stone Age barbarism and 21st century technology. That's part of it. And I'd like to pay tribute to Lord Weidenfeld because 30 years ago exactly, he published a book of mine which was called in English Hitler's Apocalypse. But in Germany, where it was translated a year later, it had a more resonant title and one that reflected the content better. It was called Der antisemitische Wahn, the anti-Semitic mania or madness, and subtitled Von Hitler zum Heiligen Krieg gegen Israel, from Hitler to the Holy War against Israel. And basically everything that we're discussing now, 30 years ago, you can find it there in the closing chapters. In other words, it wasn't that difficult to see the storm that was coming even then. And the thing that sparked my attention to it was basically the Iranian Revolution of 1979, because it seemed clear to me already then, both from a general point of view, but also from a more specific Jewish standpoint, that this would be one of the turning points of the 20th century. And that basically the heirs of Nazism, not in a literal sense, but in a more complicated and sophisticated way, which I'll try and illuminate in a moment, actually could be found both in Tehran and other parts of the Middle East. And that was my thesis. And actually, ever so briefly, for about 3 weeks, it actually got onto the bestseller list in the London Evening Standard, and then it disappeared, never to be discussed again in academia, where it was, of course, pure heresy. Let me pick up on 1 or 2 points that Robin alluded to, and let me begin with this question of totalitarianism, because it relates both to what I saw then 30 years ago and what we are witnessing today. I would suggest to you at least 3, possibly 4 points of resemblance between what we could describe as the eliminationist program or even the exterminationist ideology of National Socialism in the 1930s and 40s. And what we have been seeing gradually crystallize over the last 30 years, coming to a climax in our day. First of all, with the centrality of the Jewish question. Many scholars, even to this day, still try and deny that with regard to Nazism. Although I think that among serious historians, there's increasingly a broad consensus that the so-called final solution of the Jewish question was a central pillar, both of Hitler's worldview, of the Nazi movement, and of its policy in World War II. We should not underestimate the centrality of an eliminationist anti-Semitism today in virtually all of the Islamist movements. Hamas being a particularly good example, but in my book, A Lethal Obsession, in 2010, I analyzed the points of view of pretty much all the jihadist organizations. ISIS did not yet exist, but it is no different on this issue. Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, Hizb al-Tahrir, various organizations in Asia, including the Pakistani-based jihadi outfit that organized the massacre in Mumbai. Pretty much wherever we look, we find that a genocidal anti-Semitism is a fundamental part of the worldview of these militant groups. Perhaps I should put militant in inverted commas because of the abusive way in which this is used by all the major news organizations, including the BBC, who invariably refer to Hamas and all the other related groups, except for ISIS, as militants, which makes them sound as if they are some group of shop stewards somewhere in Liverpool going on strike over wages. If we ask ourselves, what is it about the Jewish issue that could explain this obsessive insistence that killing Jews, that eliminating the State of Israel, demonizing world Jewry, Judaism, Zionism, the Jewish lobbies, what is it that is so central? Then I think we have to remind ourselves of something that I think is clearer today, retrospectively, and which Nazism should really have led people to internalize a long time ago. The denunciation of Jewry, Zionism, Israel, is part of and a prologue to a much bigger issue for which Jews stand, both symbolically and in the minds of the jihadists, in real terms. The Jews, according to this perception, grossly distorted as obviously it must appear to us, the Jews are the movers and shakers of history. Everything that happens in this world from the dawn of time, in this case from the dawn of Islam, is actually due and a result of Jewish and today Zionist and Israeli machinations. In other words, this genocidal anti-Semitism is premised on a conspiracy theory of society, of history, of world politics. It is broadly drawn from the protocols of the elders of Zion. Robin, if he at that time, no doubt would have alluded to the fact that in the Hamas Charter of 1988, but repeated constantly in their propaganda, in their broadcasts, on Hamas TV, Al-Aqsa TV, the protocols are recognized as an authentic source and document for their